This is another episode of The Space Race, a show where I explore emerging technologies with experts from the industry. This season is dedicated to voice and all the different aspects that come with it. If you are into voice and you'd like to learn more, please stay tuned. This month, we're talking about voice meets search. And I'm doing that together with my co-host, Tim Jansen.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Hey, Tim. Tim is an SEO consultant from our Merkel Amsterdam office. And today we also have one of the thought leaders in the field, Aleyda Solis.
Hello, thank you very much for having me today. I'm very, very excited to share with you today. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, Aleyda, how did you get in touch with voice?
Well, I think that most of us in SEO, because at the end of the day, what we look for is to connect with the way that the users search. Since users are using much more voice, it's our duty at the end of the day to take that into consideration in order to better satisfy with a best possible experience, right? So taking into consideration voice search and in general this conversational search type of behavior of the user is a must nowadays for SEOs, I think.
Okay, so for marketers listening to this show, wondering what is voice search, can you maybe give them a brief introduction in what you mean by that?
Yeah, well, in general, I will say is the popularization of using voice as an input, right? We have now the assistants that are integrated everywhere, in every device, even on our mobiles and on our smartwatches, even in our laptops, even if we don't use them as much there, in the specific smart devices for homes from different types. So at the end, we can interact with search via voice through all this different type of hardware or of devices, right, from everywhere. So it's what I have to say that is fundamental that we take that into consideration as a use case when we do a keyword research. Keyword research is the process in SEO where we analyze the way that users search. And yeah, that is how we connect with voice in general in SEO.
So if you're talking about SEO and keyword research, how does that work?
Well, in the SEO process, we always start by focusing on understanding the search behavior of our users, right? And there's a share of users nowadays using voice as an input, right? So instead, especially on the go, right? Instead of typing something on their laptop or on their mobile, they will just go to the Google Assistant or to Siri or to whatever assistants and search for something, right? Realistically, I have to say, from the different type of analysis that I have done and also data that has been shared publicly by Google even or Microsoft in the past, most of this type of queries are for specific actions or to-do that don't necessarily have to do with the type of research that or transactional type of queries that we focus on in SEO. So for example, most of this type of queries done via voice nowadays still are for example, to remind ourselves of to-dos or even to ask about the weather or ask about an address. For example, this very specific type of actions and with an intent that is not necessarily transactional. And I have to say that this is actually for me as a user, right, very reasonable. I wouldn't expect nobody to buy a dress over voice because imagine I even end up buying sometimes the wrong size, even if I see the product and I validate the product visually. So I don't expect that we end up doing many complicated or complex or transactional type of queries only via voice because honestly, it requires a visual support to satisfy the user experience. So I think that, yes, voice as an input is nowadays important and it will certainly evolve. Voice only as an output, I don't think that this will happen. And that is why I think that many players like Google, very intelligently, right, they have now released the smart displays. So they understand that we as visual people, right, we need an output that is not only by voice, but also is shown, is visualized easily, so we can actually see the product that we are purchasing or the information that we want to verify or check with, and we need the visual output, right? So I believe that it's not about the voice only. I think that that's very unlikely, right, as a trend. But yes, as the integration of voice within a much more bigger type of search behavior of the user, and to connect it more with a visual output that we will still require to satisfy our needs.
And do you think the coming of the Google Nest Hub and the other smart displays will give a boost in transactional intents for voice as well? So you can also use a voice strategy for transactional purposes?
Indeed, because right now, for example, we only expect to hear the answer of the result. We are not going to, very likely, right, to do in the first place, the input via voice either. But if I know that I am interacting with a smart display device that has the capacity to show me the result instead of only telling me the result or the answer, I will very likely be willing and more open to do the initial request by voice and to expect the answer to be via voice and answer and also with a visual output.
And would you consider that maybe people have a preference for an Alexa or Google Assistant when this transactional intent will come?
Yeah, well, realistically, I have to say that scenario, I think that Amazon with their own device, Alexa, is very well positioned for transactional type of queries, right? So I don't expect that people will tend to request, for example, hotel information there. But yes, it is directly connected with the type of products. And we see that many of the scenarios where people are also willing right now to do transactional type of interactions with the device is because they already know the product and they have in many occasions already the product saved in their past history of their behavior with the platform. Via other channels that they could have had even. So it's very straightforward for them because they already know what they are buying, right? So it's not that they will use necessarily that to convert new users, but yes, to better engage and interact with existing customers for sure.
And for yourself, because you're also working for clients, do you focus more on the Google Assistant or more on the Alexa?
In my case, it's Google, definitely, because yes, as SEO in general would tend to optimize for Google in the Western world at the end of the day, right? Yeah. But indeed, I mean, if I were doing optimization or digital marketing work for a provider or retailer that has some sort of presence in Amazon and relies on the Amazon platform to sell their products or their goods, I will definitely try as much as possible to include that into the mix of what I am doing for them with Alexa.
For your clients, you're more focused on the informational queries because you're focusing on Google?
Yeah, well, not really. Most of our clients are e-commerce websites, transactional websites at the end of the day. But yes, I mean, in the keyword research process, we want to connect with the client through the whole conversion journey since the discovery phase. So, of course, for example, with the content that is generated for the blog, the more informational type of content, I want to make sure when users research for this type of content, that the content is correctly formatted to be viable content to be spoken, correctly spoken, right? And for that, Google has actually shared guidelines to structure your content in short phrases, concise phrases, in order to make it in a more voice-friendly way, right? Yeah. And to fulfill certain type of best practices, right? That is correctly formulated, grammatically correct type of information that can be provided. And I have found that by formatting, for example, blog posts of my clients, when I have identified that there are a lot of the typical W's type of queries, of questions within the terms in the keyword research.
The typical W's?
W, the what, the when, the how, questions, right? These are the type of queries that are triggered usually via voice because they are conversational, right? Not the ones that you tend to type necessarily, right? So for this type of queries, of questions, the content targeting this type of terms, what I try to do is to trigger them via the voice app, the assistant, to see how well they are ranking, how they are displayed, if they are actually shown as the answer. It has been shown there's a relatively high correlation with those featured as position 0 as a
highlighted search
indeed features as a feature snippet, indeed, or what is search feature in Google search results, position 0. There's a high correlation with those shown there with the ones that are given as an answer by the assistant. And this is, I have to say that this is a little bit the big risk in SEO, and not only for SEOs, but actually for the user, right? The thing, when results are displayed via visually, right, we see a variety of options to fulfill a request. And it's true that most of the users will tend to click on the top 3 results. We all know that. But at least at least they have options, right? Be a voice. This is much more restrictive if we are only provided one answer, right? And for me, that carries an important risk on diversifying and giving options to users, right? And let's forget about SEO for a moment, but yeah, it's very risky to end up in a bubble like this, right? Only having a single answer for everything. So I think that at some point, search engines, they need to evaluate this risk and be able to pivot and evolve accordingly. And then on the other hand, for me as an SEO and as a user, is an additional incentive to be the first result to be some of the top results, because these are the results that tend to be featured as a feature snippet again, which have a high correlation with the answer provided by the assistant. So it's like a win-win-win, like a bigger need to be on the top results to be able to be the answer by the assistant too.
And could you maybe share some best practices or techniques to get the featured snippet, like the highlighted search result?
Yes, so correctly well-formatted phrases that are well-structured, using headings, for example, addressing directly the question that the user asks, that is a must. I have found also that, for example, sometimes we obsess a lot on trying to make the whole content super long, super long, because we think on relevance, right? By Google, we want to add more text than our competitors to be perceived as more relevant and rank first. Yes, although we need to make sure that, for example, the paragraph are short enough to be spoken, right? So we need to balance it out. Well, on one hand, the way that we format the information. And I have found in many occasions how a super long post, the specific area that Google takes into consideration to highlight as a feature snippet and then to provide these bullets in the spoken answer are not necessarily even in the first paragraph or in the first area of the post, but at the end, because this is the one that addresses that specific question, right? So we need to think which are the actual questions, not terms, questions that users or customers are asking about this particular topic, this particular service, this particular product, and format our content to fulfill very specifically this type of questions. That is on one hand. Then on the other hand, of course, we have structured data that we can use for FAQs, for how-tos that Google is now giving us and supporting more. I have been testing also in the past actions directly to generate actions. For example, I had a website that is called Why My Web Traffic Drop, right? And with a question directly there. So what I did was to generate an action for the Google Assistant, for which I needed zero coding, because they really facilitate the process by providing you templates that you just need to fill to generate an action. And of course, these are not the results that you will get via desktop or mobile visually, but yes, that we have a higher chances to be triggered as the answer, again, when there's a highly related intent from the question of the user. So I think that there's so many opportunities to not only to improve current content that we have on our website, existing content, but also to expand our presence via actions, right? To give additional support and connect in different ways to the users.
So can you tell a bit more about any findings from this experiment? Did it help you in getting or becoming more relevant, according to Google, to have the action next to the website?
Well, not really more relevant, I have to say, because actually in this particular case, it was a trivia. It was not even an FAQ. I will say that probably would have been better an FAQ to give it a go, but I ended up doing the trivia because it was simpler and more fun for me to do at that point. But I can think, right, if I am doing this, if I were doing this for a client, unfortunately, I haven't yet still had the chance, because indeed, as an SEO, we have so many other priorities to do until reaching that point. I'm afraid my clients are not necessarily, usually not that mature within the process, right? They have so many much more basic stuff to worry about. But if we reach that point and the sophistication to be able to do this type of presence with the clients, I will say, I will try to replicate the type of experience that they have with their FAQ section or support section, but with an action format in order to expand, not only replicate, but even to expand the type of experience that they provide with their FAQ or with the support section over voice. Because in many occasions, these are very simple questions, especially. I will select those more simple questions that is like, go to like how to use X or Y functionality of your tool, right?
Yeah. It's a fascinating aspect of voice. A lot of people talk about voice search, and they consider that as the world of voice. And then you have a lot of people who talk about voice, but they talk about native applications. Like you're saying, there's two different worlds there. And we also at Merkle try to make the distinction very clear. not a lot of clients are up to having their voice search optimized and having an action yet, but we're slowly getting there, and I'm curious to see how this will impact either the adoption of the voice application or if it's going to help in voice search results.
I have to say something. I really think that at least for Google, I don't know if for the rest of the players, but at least for Google, whose work has been focused mostly, of course, on being the web search engine, right? We are seeing how they are pushing more and more progressive web apps to try to bring those, presence that has existed right now in apps only and in a very close environment that they haven't been able to crawl or to index, right? To bring them to the web, to make that content and functionality accessible and much more seamless, to provide a unique experience to the user via progressive web apps. I think I have the sense of the feeling, right? That the approach with voice at the end of the day shouldn't be to create a unique type of app again or an action to be used as the voice interaction or the voice interface, but just to have an add-on or to add more information like structured data to your own existing web information to be able to be provided as the answer to. Like this, they will minimize the friction, the effort, and they will also tend to avoid the issue or the big challenge that we have had until now with the big, very fraction word of web via app, right? To try to not replicate that with voice either.
Yeah.
And you just said that feature snippet is mostly the answer for voice search as well. Well, the feature snippet is both shown on the web as on voice as well right now. Do you see that it maybe could conflict with each other because the intent of a voice user might be different than a web user?
Well, it might happen now that you mention, right? Like maybe the intent might change a bit. But I have to say I am more worried on if the intent is not the right one, is to not give choices to the user. Because at the end of the day, sometimes the first result is not the 100% accurate one. And sometimes Google doesn't understand necessarily the intent visually, right, via the desktop results or mobile results that are shown, and there's not necessarily a big consequence out of that because it's not if it is not the first result, it will be the second or third one. If they have big option, it will be very, very bad at this point that Google doesn't give in the top 10 results something meaningful. The problem is with voice, and the risk is in voice that we get only an answer, right? So I see the risk not necessarily being like a disconnect or a difference between the mobile versus desktop intent. That of course it can happen, but even if Google does a good job in general by understanding the mobile intent, sometimes that might not be even the case, and since we only get a single answer, we will be like very biased or having not necessarily the best type of experience that we may have as users indeed.
And do you think that will change in the future?
Hopefully yes. I'm pretty sure that if I am thinking of this, people that are very into this word or developing this in Google, and since Google is also very into scrutiny usually of being balanced enough, non-biased enough, they should be worrying about this indeed. So I am expectant to see how they can come up with a balanced solution, because I can see it a little bit being tricky. Maybe following up with the user through a much more conversational type of experience, telling the user, look, this is the first answer, but I have many other answers. And we can see already how in the app, the Google app, when after we ask something, we see related queries, right? That Google wants us to continue asking, because again, it's the conversational journey. They want to keep us engaged. That makes sense. That they want that we have a real conversation with them, not disconnected questions, like with the search engine, right? They want to be they are the assistant, right? At the end of the day, there. So I can see how they might integrate that into the mix of being much more active on recommending, incentivizing us to continue asking if we are not satisfied, because they actively can say to the user, we have many more options regarding this topic that we can tell you about. So it's like asking our friend and having a much more fulfilling two-way type of conversation. Yeah. Unfortunately, since we are not used to that paradigm, it might take a little bit more time, right? Yeah.
you are working for clients, and I can imagine you might have some definition of success or maybe some metrics you keep in mind. Can you maybe tell a bit more about that?
Yeah, well, success for me is to maximize my clients' search visibility in search results. If, in answers, for example, in order to get them more traffic, more conversions, more revenue at the end of the day, right? That is for me success.
But how do you measure that for voice? Because that's quite hard at the moment, right?
Yeah, indeed. This is the thing. Right now, for some reason, I can't imagine, because it's much more harder to isolate. No player right now is giving us specific numbers of the type of results that are actually provided via voice, and segment and allow us to segment those that are provided via voice than visually provided, right? In the past, I talked with someone from one of the biggest search engine, and this person told me that the complexity was in that sometimes people, a lot of times actually, people started to search via voice, but they continue interacting by typing on the mobile. Then the answer was again via voice, and they answer back via typing. So there are so many of this type of mixed interactions that makes them much more difficult to isolate. I think we should get there at some point to better understand how we can improve and maximize and provide the best possible experience to the user, and segment better our strategies accordingly. Yeah.
On which metrics are you reporting then? If you do like a voice search strategy or something, or more the SEO
voice for me
metrics?
Is, no. For me, it's SEO metrics, and that's it. Yeah. I cannot report at this point, unfortunately. These are the type of answers that are provided via voice. What I do actually is, this is how I have maximized your results visibility in rankings and also in search features. Yeah. And a high correlation of search features will end up being the answers of the apps. But I have to say, this is just a metric for me that will very likely be a little bit of a vanity metric. At the end of the day, my clients, what they really care about is about conversions and revenue. So I need to speak the same language of my clients. And yes, they care that they are shown and they are making the most out of each channel, which is great. But at the end, and there are metrics that I want to track for me in order to improve and optimize myself. But unfortunately, I have to say, they don't care about how many pages are crawled or indexed or whatever. They want to know if we have reached the traffic goals, the conversion goals, and the revenue goals, and that's it. Yeah.
So for you, the voice search part of the search part is more an extension and more the bonus of a traditional organic search strategy.
It is. Yeah. It is.
When you're working for clients, not all clients are always open for trying out new stuff. How do you expand your knowledge?
Well, this is the thing, right? In my case, it's not because they don't really want or they don't really care or they're close to this is not important. I think that most of us see how many of us are using the assistants nowadays, right? But realistically, they can be even reluctant and using the technology. But it's not about that, at least for me, right? It's about having so many other priorities and even big brands to have limited resources and limited timeline, right? So we need to prioritize accordingly.
Yeah, you do your own research. That's what I'm hinting at. You have your own experiments going on.
Yeah.
With your own. So can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah. So, for example, for my how my web traffic drop, and then I also have my own project, my own side project that is called Remoters, right? It's a remote work website. We have more than 1,000 visitors per day, so it's good to try a few things. So, for example, every single blog post, informational type of post that we create, we develop, we do this first iteration. That is the simple traditional SEO approach, right? Do a keyword research, identify opportunity, get the content out there to try to provide even more content than our competitors to be identified as more meaningful, more relevant. And then after we get the content out there, we do another review to identify for which type of queries the content is already ranking more or less. For many of this will be like flat terms, right? But more and more I am seeing that there are a lot of how-tos, right? As how to become a remote employee, how to start working remotely, how to become a digital nomad, how to get a reliable connection when we're traveling abroad. These are the type of terms that we will tend to target. So, and I really want to, what I do is to try to filter the keyword data with the 6 W's, again, the how, the who, the where, when, etc., to identify those opportunities. And then I validate and I take a look at and see if there are any feature snippet being shown for these terms. And if they are, this when I go and check on my via voice, right? Who's provided as an answer if I am not, to identify how they are doing it, how they are formatting their content versus me. Sometimes I have found I am even outranking them in desktop results. Maybe this other website is in second and I am in first. So how the feature snippet is generated with them instead of me, right? And this is the one provided as the answer via voice. So I go and take a look at how they are organized, how they are formatted, how they are putting and specifying the text, the content out there. I read the content out loud. This is important, right? How does it sound? What is the difference between them and me? To update accordingly and format accordingly and try to push that is my side, that is already more or less there, right? That is taken as the answer instead of them. So this is the type of approach that I take in mind. So I take it as a very natural additional validation than my keyword research and also content optimization process that I already have in place.
Wow. Personal question. Do you have any smart speakers at home?
I do.
Yeah? What do you have at home?
I have a Google Home and I also have an Alexa device. I have the two.
Without screens?
Without screens.
What do you use them for?
I actually almost never use them for anything, I have to say. Yes.
No timers for cooking?
No
music?
I don't cook. Well, anyway, let's forget about that. I never say, no, actually, whenever I use the assistant, it's always with my mobile. Because I never separate myself from my mobile. So for me, it's much more natural to do any questions directly within my mobile, not instead of.
I can see you have an iPhone, so you're talking to Siri or you're talking to Google Assistant or Alexa?
The Google Assistant. Okay. Yeah, but for me, like I use the Google app a lot. I use also a lot of discovers when, for example, when traveling, I travel a lot, and it is very natural for me to have the app open and switch very quickly and just click on the speak button and ask whatever, right? So my interaction with voice is actually via my mobile device, not even via the Google Home or whatever.
Is it eyes free or hands free, or do you also switch between talking and typing?
Talking and typing all the time. Yeah, it's a switch. I don't remember to have only a spoken type of interaction only, right? I'm always switching all the time.
I'm just wondering, because you're really involved into the voice search part of the voice world, how do you see voice search evolving in the coming years and the usage of it?
Well, I think that it's going to evolve effectively, as I mentioned at the beginning, but we cannot expect these crazy stats that are repeated again and again that, oh my God, more than, I don't know how much crazy percentage of queries are going to be made via voice already next year. That's not going to happen, right? I think that we can expect that voice will be part much more of the mix of the input of the queries that we get from users, and then more as an output along the visual aspect to really satisfy most of their needs. So I think that, yes, at some point we should get the data to be able to optimize our presence in general accordingly. But I don't think that we ever will switch only to voice, nor will stick with visual results, but it will be a mix. It will be a mix of the two. Yeah.
And if someone is listening right now and would like to start with voice search, what would you suggest to do?
Well, I will say to take a look at a lot of the data. For example, there are a lot of analysis that have been done in the past by SEMrush, for example, with a lot of correlation data of which are the results provided via voice, and they are refreshing this information. For example, they published the first one a couple of years ago, then they published a new refresher one at SMX Advance a few months ago in Seattle. So they're always refreshing this data to be able to take that into consideration, those criteria, into your own SEO process, right? I have also presented in the past, so if you want, you can go to my Slideshare, Aleyda Solis, and you will see that I have done in the past a lot of presentations with very actionable step-by-step type of tips to follow within your keyword research, content optimization process, to implement structured data, to be able to improve the opportunities that you may have with your own content.
Great advice.
Thank you.
So you already mentioned your SlideShare. Is there what other locations should people look for if they would like to know more about you?
I am very present in Twitter. So at Aleyda in Twitter, I am. And then of course my website, aleydasolis.com, and my consultancy company that is called orainti.com.
Great. That's it for this week. I heard lots of new stuff about voice and search. Thank you very much for joining us, Aleyda. And Tim, great to have you here as well. We'll be closing off and we'll be back with a new episode next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for your time, Sam.